Okay.
A very good evening, esteemed faculty and regular faculty at Ahmedabad branch, Advocate Avinash Ji, Chairman Ahmedabad branch, CA Harit Dhariwal, Vice Chairman, CA Bhishan Shah, Chairman for the CPE Committee, CA Rahul Maliwal, Coordinator for today's session, CA Hiren Pathak and CA Ankit, senior members and my dear friends. Welcome to this important session, and the icing on the cake it is taken by Dr. Avinash Ji, Dr. Advocate CA Avinash Ji. Welcome Avinash Ji to Ahmedabad branch. Let's start the session with ICI motto. I request each one of you to place your right hand on your heart for ICI motto.
Yaesha Supteshu Jagrati Yaesha Supteshu Jagrati Kamam 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 Pursho Nirmimanaha Tadeva Shukram Tada Brahma Tadeva Amritamucchate Tasmin Lokaha Shataha Sarvetadunatyapi Kaschan
Thank you, Shehzad Bhai. Welcome back. I would now request Chairman Ahmedabad branch CA Harit Dhariwal to give opening remarks.
Thank you, Anjali Ben. Very respected faculty for the session, Dr. CA Avinash Podar Ji, who joined us from Surat virtually. The Chairman of CPE Committee, CA Rahul Maliwal, Vice Chairman Bhishan Bhai, Secretary Anjali Ben, the coordinators Hiren Bhai, and all the dear participants. A very good evening to all of you. A very important topic today on the role of CA in handling the summons, warrants, and arrest. And we are very happy to have Avinash Ji here join us for this session. Sir, we are listening to you after a long time, and I'm sure all the participants are eager to learn from your vast knowledge and experience. Just sharing a few events which are coming up at branch. First and foremost, I think tomorrow is a World Youth Skills Day. So on that Skills Day, we are going to launch a very interesting session on skill development series. So this entire series is divided into 4 parts. First is drafting skills, second is digital skills, third is personal development skills, and fourth is communication skills. So all these 4 pillars will be dealt with separately. Tomorrow we are launching the first pillar, that is drafting skills, which has 4 parts, and from tomorrow 15th, 20th, 26th and 27th July, 4 days the sessions will happen. So in case you want to register for this, please do register. Registrations are still open. Apart from this, on this Saturday, we are coming up with a special session on Benami law, a one-day workshop on Benami, wherein two very good speakers, one from Mumbai, CA Rajiv Khandelwal ji will be joining to give an overview of the Benami law, and Tushar Ajmera ji, Tushar Himani ji from Ahmedabad is going to cover the case studies of the Benami law. So very interesting one-day session on Benami is coming up on this Saturday. Apart from this, we are having 2 very interesting things. One is on the IBC. So we are planning a special series on IBC. So in case you want to start your practice and maybe know more about the insolvency code, Anjali Ben is coming up with a wonderful series. We are soon going to launch it in a few days. We are also coming up with a series on RERA. So again, there will be kind of a RERA ki Pathshala, wherein we'll be covering everything from A to Z of RERA. So that is going to come soon. And regarding the internal audits, again, we are going to have something very big. We are going to have a big conference on internal audits in the month of August. So these are the few events that we have planned at Ahmedabad branch. And yes, apart from these, the routine seminars, sessions will keep on happening. With this, I once again thank Avinash ji today, sir, for coming here. And thank you, Rahul bhai, for arranging this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman, for the important updates and guidance. I'm sure the participants would can take, in fact, from the baskets of all the fruits, whichever session you like. And I think the skill development series is very well designed and drafted. I request each one of you take the advantage of it. Now I would request CA Rahul. Yes, Chairman.
I have just one more announcement to make. I think, sorry, Rahul bhai, I'm just taking 1 minute. I think after the super success of Movement 73, and based on the request of so many members, Ahmedabad branch is also starting a virtual fitness training program. It will be only for the Ahmedabad branch members. So basically, you can, if you want to join this virtual training program, we're going to launch it today evening. It will start from Friday. So again, a similar 5-day online workout schedule will be going to you. And every 4th Saturday at branch will be a workout carnival, fitness carnival. So we'll be celebrating the fitness that we all did for 73 days in a very small manner, but yes, a very fruitful manner for all of us. So the announcement will be out today evening. So do take part in that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So one more thing to be added in the basket. There is, in fact, everyone will have everything here. There is education, there is fitness, and 360 development of all our members. I would now request CA Rahul Maliwal to take the session ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The faculties of the today's session, our own as well as Advocate Avinash Ji, the dynamic chairman of Ahmedabad branch, CA Harit Dhariwal, the vice chairman of Ahmedabad branch, CA Bishan Shah, the honorable secretary of Ahmedabad branch, CA Anjali Choksi, the coordinator of the today's session, CA Hiren Patak and CA Ankit Setia, and all the dear participants. Now welcome you all in this today's seminar of the demystifying the critical legal procedure, and that is related to the summons, arrest and warrant. Now as we speak, because of the technology that is like machine learning, artificial intelligence, that all are crushing the compliance practices day in day out. So we need to find out some other avenues of the practices, and in this particular time, the arrest, warrant, and the related some practice related to the summons, and in that how a CA can play a pivotal role in the same. For that we have the today's speaker with us, CA Avinash Podar, and now I will request Anjali Babi to take the session forward again.
Thank you, Rahul bhai, for arranging this beautiful session. I'm sure the participants are going to have an amazing experience today. I would now request CA Hiren Patak to introduce the esteemed faculty, Avinash Ji.
Thank you. It would be my privilege to introduce very well known faculty for today's session, Avinash Podar sir. Avinash sir has completed chartered accountancy in 2000 with excellent academic record and rank in merit list. He is practicing chartered accountant since 17 years in direct tax and indirect tax, and since last 5 years he is practicing as an advocate. In such a short span, he is having many landmark judgments in his name. Dynamic education qualification of sir includes BCom, LLB, FCA, DISA, insolvency professional, certified financial planner, Microsoft certified professional, and list go on to include as sir has also completed various certification course conducted by ICI, such as arbitration, forensic accounting, fraud detection, valuation, IFRS, and indirect tax as well. Sir has recently completed PhD in GST, having the research paper such as convergence of excise, service tax, and VAT into GST and its likely impact on industry of Gujarat state. Sir is associated with Aswa Legal Advisors LLP, attorney as advocate as founder partner, and with CA firm Aap and Company as legal advisor, having offices based at Ahmedabad, Surat, Delhi, which has branches and associations all over India. He is specialized in representing legal litigation works pertaining to indirect taxes, appeared and argued before Honorable Supreme Court, various High Courts, State, Commissioner Appeal, Settlement Commission, Authority for Advance Ruling, NCLT, etc. He is special invitee for Insolvency and Bankruptcy Court Committee of ICI, GST and Indirect Tax Committee of ICI, Indirect Tax Committee of PhD Chamber of Commerce, Delhi, and member of very such reputed organization. Sir has delivered more than 900 lectures all over India at various professional forums and authored lot many GST books and books on indirect tax as well. With this brief introduction of sir, on behalf of Ahmedabad branch and members thereof, I welcome Dr. Advocate CA IP Avinash Podar sir. Sir, please take the charge.
And one more thing to share, that sir has been recognized by Southern India Chamber of Commerce for his work as a chartered accountant. So, sir, we are proud of you that हमारा नाम और हमारी डिग्री वहां पे भी रोशन हो रही है. Hope it will continue. Since you are now advocate, I guess after 15 years they have to recognize your efforts as an advocate also, or we at Ahmedabad branch has to recognize that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. At the outset, I would like to thank, as usual, Ahmedabad branch for giving me this wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful session, wonderful topic, but unfortunately, it do not utters even a single word for GST. And therefore, it is something which is very, very challenging for me because I am known for GST and service tax. And now I'm going to speak something about the core legal field. Before starting that, I would like to thank Hiren Bhai for being a wonderful friend and for the wonderful introduction. Harit Bhai for always trusting me, believing in me and giving me the opportunity. Bishan Bhai, as usual, a very close friend. And Rahul Bhai for bearing with me and bearing with all the inconvenience that was caused to the branch because of my non-availability. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was handling one of the matters wherein one of the senior enforcement directorate officer was arrested. And therefore, on that day, when the session was, I think it was kept on 6th of July, I was arguing for his bail before the court. So that was the reason I could not take up the session on that particular day. So I'm really sorry for the inconvenience that is caused to the branch. But that was an opportunity for a chartered accountant come advocate to represent, because we are known for fighting against the department. So therefore, if an opportunity comes wherein we have to fight for the department, I think that is a bigger rule when we professionals must involve ourselves. Because we should be neutral. We should not be against the department. We should not be for the department. It has to be, we should be neutral both for the clients as well as for the department. Anyways, today's topic is a detailed and a very lengthy topic. The allotted time of 2 hours is certainly not going to be enough. So what I've tried to do is, let me just 2 minutes summarize what I'm going to do today. This is just an overview that I'll be giving of CRPC, that is Code of Criminal Procedure, CPC, that is Code of Civil Procedure, Constitution of India, and the Indian Penal Code. So therefore, I have selected few of the important aspects pertaining to arrest and warrant and also the summons. And therefore, I will be covering that. Verbatim wise, I have not prepared any presentation for that, but yes, I do have a material which I have prepared for all the participants. I'll be sharing that. And with that material, we'll go one by one. What I intend to do is, because the session timings are 5:30 to 7:30, I intend to cover up by 7:15. And then 15 minutes, I want to have the interaction of question and answer so that all the participants, I presume that all the participants are chartered accountants, and this may be a topic which may not be very, very relevant for them, or maybe I will say tempting for them, because this is something which they are not inclined to work on. But at the same time, I would say, looking to the scenario, looking to the way and the manner in which the things are changing, we chartered accountants have to be aware of all these laws which are there pertaining to summons, arrest, and warrants. It is not mandatory for us to practice that law, but what is important for us is that we should be aware of this law and we should accordingly practice and develop our practice. So just allow me to share the screen.
Shehzad bhai, please allow the sir to share his screen.
Is the screen visible?
Sir, the screen is visible, but here it is only you are sharing the screen. Oh, okay, now it is visible.
Is it visible now?
Yeah, perfect, sir.
Okay. So this is the topic of the day, wherein we are supposed to have a discussion so far as handling of the summons, warrants, and arrest, and our role as a chartered accountant. As I've already stated, that we'll not only try to understand the concepts, but we as a chartered accountant will also try to find out and locate where we can fit in or where we can play some role so far as this important aspect is concerned. This is what I would give as a outline, that what a chartered accountant broadly is contributing as a professional. I'm of the view that he is not only into advisory services. A lot of advisory services are being given day in and day out by a chartered accountant. At the same time, he is much more involved into compliances. Now, friends, when I say compliances, again, the mind triggers towards filing of returns, but I'm not only to the extent of filing of returns. We as a chartered accountants are into lot many compliances which are not related to filing of returns or any form. It is more towards the compliance of a particular law, which is imposed or which is getting implicated on a person who is engaged into some business activity. And last but not the least, we are also inclined, or rather many of us are practicing for representations on behalf of their clients, maybe before the adjudicating authority, maybe before the appellate authority, and maybe before the tribunals. So these are the roles broadly which I wanted to initiate and share with all of you, that as an advisor, we play a role as a compliance. We are playing a role, and then we also have a role in the litigations or representations. Now the question arises, whether can we identify and locate any difference between a chartered accountant as an advocate or an advocate? As per me, to be very honest, there is no difference at all. Why I am saying so? See, there can be restriction on the basis of a statute or a proceeding. But as such, if we try to locate or identify any difference in a chartered accountant or an advocate, I'm of the view that there is no difference. The only aspect that we need to understand is a chartered accountant is generally not allowed to appear or to represent in the judicial proceedings. Please bear with me and please try to understand. I'm saying in most of these situations, he is not allowed to appear for a judicial proceedings. I have not said that he is not allowed in judicial proceedings in all situations. In what situations he can appear, I'll just narrate that also. But in all the quasi-judicial situations or quasi-judicial actions or proceedings, he is always allowed to appear. So therefore, I'm of the view that a chartered accountant or an advocate are not having much of the difference, and therefore both roles and responsibilities of both the professionals are common. And therefore, not only a chartered accountant or an advocate can be an advisor, a compliance person, or a litigant or a representative for his clients. The only restriction which comes forth is that a chartered accountant cannot be participating as a representative in the judicial proceedings before the court of law. But in every quasi-judicial proceedings, he is certainly allowed to participate and to represent his clients. Now let us move to the core aspect which we are supposed to discuss today. And since there is a paucity of time, because the topic which is given to me is very, very broad and elaborate. And being a chartered accountant, it may not be of use in day-to-day basis for all of us. So therefore, it will again become a boredom for all of us to understand and digest this particular topic. So therefore, what I'm inclined to do is, I'll take you through some of the very, very important aspects which I want to cover so far as this topic is concerned. And once that is covered, I'll share this material with all of you, which has a detailed inclusion of all the provisions pertaining to arrest summons under the 4 laws that I'm intending to cover today in brief. Obviously, see, I covered this before WRC also, and now WRC is also planning for an entire series. And even I can recommend to the Ahmedabad branch also that they can also come out with a series, legal series, wherein we can have the interplay of these laws, that is Code of Criminal Procedure, Code of Civil Procedure, Indian Penal Code, Constitution of India, Indian Evidence Act, which we are not reading, which we are not practicing in day-to-day life, but which are very, very relevant if we intend to work and appear for our clients, even before the lowest of the authorities, that means a superintendent or a ITO. For that proceeding also, I believe that this knowledge is certainly going to help each one of us. So therefore, summon, warrants and arrest under CRPC, under CPC, under IPC and Constitution of India. So this is what I incline to cover. And now this is the topic which I have bifurcated. For summons, we'll be taking up the provisions pertaining to summons in CRPC, which runs from section 61 to section 69, and section 91 and 92 of the CRPC, the Code of Civil Procedure, that is section 27 to 32, section 132 to 133, and order number 5, which is very, very relevant for all of us. Now, we chartered accountants are generally practicing in the civil side, and therefore, Code of Civil Procedure 1908. Now, I being a person who is known for GST, if we read section 70 under GST, section 70 clearly provides that it is a judicial proceedings under CRPC. But still a chartered accountant can go and appear before the authorities on behalf of the client or the assessee or the taxpayer. Why he is allowed to do so? Because this is a quasi-judicial proceedings. It may be said to be a judicial proceedings in the statute or under the clauses of the statute, but practically when any proceedings are not before a judicial authority or a judge, I'm of the view that that becomes a quasi-judicial authorities or proceedings, and in any quasi-judicial proceedings, a chartered accountant is allowed to represent. So we'll start with summons and then we'll go to warrant and arrest. Again, it's a very, very detailed aspect. So therefore, we'll try to have an overview of everything. See, my inclination will not be to run through each of the provisions and make you understand that. No, not at all. My intention would be to give you an overview, because we all are learned, we all are qualified, and therefore it is not at all required that we can be or we should be spoon-fed. And therefore, what I will do is I'll just give an outline and overview of the entire aspect, entire subject, and the respective things can be read by all of you at your leisure, at your convenience. But I am of the view that a chartered accountant must be aware of all these provisions, because nowadays it is not only the summons which are being issued to a chartered accountant and his clients, but also he is being implicated and arrested for various allegations and various matters. So therefore, we must be aware about the arrest provisions. What are our rights when arrest happens? What is the procedure to be followed by the officer or by the person who is arresting? So all those things I'll try to cover within the stipulated time. So therefore, in warrants and arrest, we'll try to discuss about the chapter 5, which deals with arrest of persons under the CRPC, warrant
Sir, you are on mute, I think. We could. Avinash, sir?
I guess there is some issue at his end of internet. Let's wait.
Sir, हम सुन नहीं पा
Rahul bhai, I guess Avinash bhai's end there is problem in internet. So
He's just connecting.
yes.
He's just connecting again. There is some connectivity issue at the Avinash sir end, so he's just connecting in 2 minutes.
Rahul bhai, have you received the file?
Yes, sir. I have received the file and I'll just sharing the same.
So shall I start now?
You can start. Shazad? Or down. Bus. Sir, this is okay. So we start from
Okay.
here, sir.
Yes, fine.
Okay.
Friends, I'm sorry for the technical issue. So anyways, let us start once again. What I'm inclined to do today is, I'm inclined to give an overview of the important aspects or the important provisions of the law, which we are supposed to cover and understand the provisions pertaining to arrests, the provisions pertaining to summons. And therefore, what I am proposing to do is, these are the provisions which we are going to cover, but the important aspects only I'll be dealing with, and rest of the aspects will not be dealing, and I'll be providing this material to all of you, wherein you can very well understand, you can go through and try to understand. Now, my only apprehension is that we professionals, we chartered accountants, are generally not inclined or are not dealing into these aspects on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, it becomes very, very important for all of us. looking to the current scenario and the situation, because it is not only the implication of a taxpayer, but also it is the implication of the professional, which is being caused every now and then. And therefore, we must be aware about the provisions which are pertaining to summons and warrants and arrest. Now, friends, further, I would also like to add to this that it is not only applicable and helpful to us to understand, but this is also helpful to us even for the smallest of the summons that we are receiving, or rather, I would say a summon which is issued by even a IT or a superintendent. So therefore, what I intend to do is CRPC section 61 to 69, section 91 and 92 will be trying to cover it. Then section 27 to 32, section 132 and 133, and order number 5 of CPC that will be covering. Then in case of warrants and arrest, sections 41 to section 60 capital A are the relevant provisions pertaining to arrest in CRPC. And so far as warrants are concerned, section 70 to section 81 deals with the warrants of arrest, and therefore we'll be also having a glimpse of that. And the Code of Civil Procedure also deals with the provisions pertaining to arrest and detention, which starts from section 55 to 59, and then comes order number 21, which deals with rule number 39 onwards, 37 onwards. So I'll be requesting to please scroll down. Yeah. 37 to 40 rules, and then IPC. The question arises, why IPC? Because IPC has no provision pertaining to summons or arrest. I have specifically included IPC because this is a topic wherein what a chartered accountant should do, what a chartered accountant is expected to do in case he receives or his client receives a summon or there is an arrest or warrant issued against the client. Now, friends, as we all are aware, nowadays the department is not only in pleading or alleging the taxpayer, but they have also started alleging the chartered accountant or the advisors. So therefore, we will have to be very, very cautious because there are provisions not only in the GST law, in the income tax law. See, you all will be appreciating and accepting one point that department has started or the government has started updating the law and making the laws more stringent and strict, wherein now they are also adding up the provisions pertaining to implication of a chartered accountant or the advisor. Like if I have to give an example, then section 122 of the GST law, there is an insertion of subsection 1 capital A wherein it is said that any beneficiary, so beneficiary can also be now alleged and he can also be made a party wherein he is made liable to pay the tax or the penalty, I'm sorry. At the same time, there is a very important aspect and concept which deals with abating to an offense or abatement to an offense. So therefore, I have included the provisions of Indian Penal Code also, which deals with the abatements, which deals with contempts, because if we receive any summon and if we are not honoring that, or if we are receiving any summons and if we are submitting something which is false or which is a wrong evidence, then these also can certainly lead to the punishments under the Indian Penal Code. And therefore, that was the intention why I've included in this material. See, as I've already stated, in this scenario and the paucity of time, considering that, I'll not be able to cover even one portion of the discussion today. And unfortunately, we have lost some time because of the technical issues also. So therefore, I would request each one of you to please go through this material, and I'm certain that you will be finding it useful, because if I have to say that you please open up CRPC and CPC and read these provisions, it may be difficult for all of us. But if this material is given of 40 pages, then certainly I'm sure each one of us can read. And then last but not the least, I have tried to also include Article 19 and Article 22 of the Constitution of India. I have specifically not included Article 21, which deals with right of liberty, because right of liberty is certainly something which we all are aware of. So therefore, Article 22 becomes relevant, and therefore I have included that. please scroll down. Or what you can do is you can click on, you can get to the top of this page, go to content at glance, click on that. Yes, and then now click on A, which is summons 61 to 69. Now, first and foremost, before starting the discussion on the core subject, that is the CRPC section 61, I would wish all of us to understand what is the meaning of the term summons. What is summons all about? See, what I understand is it's a legal document. It's a legal document which is issued to the person against whom an allegation is made. So therefore, if department finds that yes, Mr. Avinash Poddar has not paid this tax, then he may issue a summon to me asking for certain specific informations on a specific date and time. So therefore, this is something which we need to understand. And as a chartered accountant, it is our duty and responsibility to read each document as soon as we receive it. And if it is found, if the document is found to be valid and legal as per the provisions of that particular statute, then in that case, we are bound to revert back to it. Otherwise, we may not be made bound to revert back to the document. So therefore, summon is nothing but a document which can be said to be a document which has legal sanctity and which is having certainty. Now the question arises, why summon? What is the need of issuance of a summon? So I would say there may be a need for issuance of summon so as to inform the person that against him a proceeding has been initiated, or he may be informed that he is supposed to appear before the authorities or the court, whosoever has issued the summon, on a particular day for a particular cause, to satisfy the officer or to revert back to the questions of the officer. And it may also be issued, a summon may also be required to be issued to a person for production of certain documents or things. So therefore, there can be three reasons why a summon is required to be issued. One, for giving him an information that some proceeding has been initiated against him. Two, he may be made or called for making some explanations or appearing before the court or before the authorities to make him understand on the allegations against him or the doubts which the authority has. And last but not the least, he may also be asked to produce certain documents or evidences pertaining to the inquiry or the initiation. So therefore, it is important and mandatory that summon cannot be issued to anyone at any point of time for anything and everything. It has to have some substance. It has to have some reasons of issuance of summon. And the reasons needs to be categorically specified in the form of summon. It has to be specific. So therefore, now coming to the essentials, or rather I would say the form of summons as per section 61, which is there on the screen. And friends, again, I'm reiterating what I've said. I'll not be able to cover the entire material which I have included or which is there on your screen. But yes, the most part of it and the best part of it, I'll certainly try to dwell into. And this will certainly give you an overview of the summons and the arrest provisions under CRPC and CPC, and also the provisions pertaining to abatement and contempt under the IPC. So form of summon, this section says if every summon issued by a court under this code shall be in writing, in duplicate, signed by the presiding officer of such court or by such other officer as the High Court may from time to time by rule direct, and shall bear the seal of the court. So therefore, what are the essentials of the summons? Now, please try to understand and please bear in mind, this may be that we are reading from the CRPC provisions, and you might be feeling that this is not relevant for us. These provisions are not relevant for us, but I am of the view that these are certainly relevant for us, because when as a chartered accountant we are receiving any summon, our client is receiving any summon, we need to check it from the perspective of section 61 and the CPC provisions also, as per order 5, that whether the contents which are required to be there or the form of summon which is mentioned or specified in the statute is properly issued or not. So therefore, the essentials of a valid summon would be, it has to be in writing. So therefore, if orally some officer is saying that you come on that particular day, it is not required, it is not, you are not summoned, because it has to be in writing, it has to be in duplicate, it has to be signed and sealed by the presiding officer or any other authorized officer. It must mention the time and place of the where the person is directed to come, and it must also bear the seal of the court. So therefore, if a summon is issued by a superintendent, it must bear the seal of that particular office. Otherwise, it is not a valid summon. Now, the word, if you can see the third word, form of summon section 61, the third word which says issued by a court. The term issued is very important. Very, very important. There is a judgment, Driver versus Valli, 1961, 2 Gujarat, LR 222. In this case, the court said, the Honorable Court said that the merely making of an order for issuance of summon, if you are mentioning that summon should be issued and you are mentioning in the order sheet, that is not sufficient. The issuance of summon means the summon should be issued to the person. Now comes the another very, very important aspect. Now, friends, at times we have heard that the summon was issued to the person and no one appeared, or the person has not appeared, neither is chartered accountant nor advocate, no one has appeared. So therefore, the important aspect that needs to be dealt into is that how a summon can be served, or what is the best way to serve a summon. Friends, section 62 onward, section 62 to section 65 deals with the serving of summons, and this is something which I personally believe that each chartered accountant who intends to practice in litigation, who intends to practice law, or who intends to appear for his clients must be aware of. Because serving of summon is something which is very, very important. You might have heard section 138, the summon is not being served, the person is absconding. And unless the summon is served, there can be no proceedings in the court. So serving of summon is very, very relevant. Section 62 deals with the personal service of the summon. Section 63 deals with how the service of the summon has to be done for corporate bodies and societies. Section 64 deals with the extended service when the person summoned cannot be found. Section 64 onwards we'll be discussing later. Now let me cover one by one. Section 62. See, because of the paucity, I'll be dealing and I'll be going little fast, but this important aspects I'll certainly cover. So far as summon and so far as arrest is concerned, I'll be covering in detail, and maybe the relevant provisions of the law we may not be able to touch upon. Now, how the summon can be served or should be served. First and foremost, who can serve a summon? In case of criminal proceeding, it has to be served by a police officer or by an officer of the court issuing it, or any other public servant. And same is in case of civil also, that a person who is issuing it has to serve it, or any other public servant which is authorized or who is authorized on his behalf can serve it. Question arises, what is the procedure of serving a summon to a person? Now, please appreciate, there are two kinds of summon which are being issued. One, summon to the person against whom the allegation is made. Number one. Two, the witness who is going to make a statement, or on whose statement the department or the authorities or the court is going to rely upon. So therefore, there are two kinds of summon. One, issued to the person. Two, issued to the witness. If a summon is issued to a person, it has to be served him personally. Now, please bear in mind, this is very, very important. It has to be served to him personally. But in case where the summon is issued to a witness, it may be sent by post. So this is a difference between the summons which is issued to a person or the summon which is issued to a witness. Now further to this, if we have to understand the procedure, subsection 1 says it shall be served by the police officer or other officer authorized or by a public servant. It has to be served on the person. If it is practically possible, it has to be served on the person by delivering or tendering to him one of the duplicates of the summon. And third, subsection 3 says the person to whom the summon is so served shall sign a receipt therefore on the back of the other duplicate. So therefore this becomes a receipt. So important is not only summoning and receiving this serving the summon, but also to have a receipt of the summon. So therefore this also can play a very crucial role. At times the department alleges that a summon was given to you, you have never appeared. Now you can very well ask him the date and the manner in which the summon was served. Not only that, you can also ask him, show us the receipt or the acknowledgement of serving the summon and to whom it was served. Now this is very important. See, if it is not served personally, it is not a proper serving of summon as per section 62. It may be valid as per some other section, but as per section 62, it is certainly not valid. It is certainly not valid service. Now, friends, moving further, if we have to see and if you can note down, then there is one very important judgment, Karsan Lal Danat Ram, 1868, 5 BHRC CRC 20. Now, in this case, the court has held that merely showing a summon to a person, to a witness, is not service. Unless you hand it over to him, unless you get a receipt or acknowledgement of serving the summon, it is not a valid service. Further, Queen versus Poonamalai, 1882, this is again a judgment of Madras High Court, wherein the court held that tender of a copy of the summon to a witness is sufficient service. Unless you tender it to him, it is not at all a sufficient service. Now, one another judgment which is very, very interesting, the court has said, now Maharashtra Chakan Oil Limited, I'm repeating, now Maharashtra Chakan Oil Limited versus Shiv Shakti Poultry Farm. In this, the Honorable Bombay High Court said that the dismissal of the complaint for non-payment of RPAD charges for issuing summons to the accused would be illegal. So therefore, this again is an important aspect that it has to be served. It has to be served to a person. And if it is served and you say that payment was not made or some other allegation is there, then it doesn't matter. So therefore, the serving is something which is very important and it has to be served on the person if it is practically possible as per the provisions of section 61 subsection 2. Now moving to section 63. It says service of summons on corporate bodies and societies. Now we all are aware of this. If a summon is being issued to a private limited company or a corporate body, it has to be served to the secretary or the local manager or other principal officer of the corporation. It cannot be served to a peon. It cannot be served to a watchman. It has to be served to either secretary, local manager, or principal officer of the corporation, or by letter sent by registered post addressed to the chief officer of the corporation. It cannot be served to any other person as per the provisions of this law. Now, one very important judgment which I have come across is Anil D. Ambani versus State of Bihar. There was a summon which was being issued. Summon was issued in the name of the managing director, whereas the law says the summon has to be issued in the name of the company or the person on whom the allegation is made. So therefore, the company's name must be there. The company's name was supposed to be there in this particular judgment, wherein the Honorable Patna High Court has said that a summon issued to a managing director in case where the allegation is against the company is bad in law, the summon must be in the name of the company and it may be served to the secretary, local manager, or other principal officer. He may be a managing director. Now, not taking much of the time, please scroll down. Section 64. Please scroll down. Yeah, thank you. It says service when persons summoned cannot be found. Now, this is something which is very, very important, and please be attentive and please try to understand this thing. To whom, if a summon is issued to me, then, and if I am not found, I'm not there, then to whom it can be served, to whom it can be delivered. It clearly says it can be delivered to any other adult male member residing with me. Important to be noted. It cannot be served to a servant. It has to be served to some adult male member of the family residing with me. If a servant is residing with me and in my absence, if a summon is served to him, it is not a valid summon as per section, valid serving as per the provisions of section 64. So therefore, section 64 lays down very, very clearly that he must be an adult person. That means over the age of 18 years, he must be male, he must be a person with sound mind, he should not be insane or intoxicated, and he should be residing with me. Unless these conditions are satisfied, it will not be a proper service. And you can see the explanation at the end of this section, which says a servant is not a member of the family within the meaning of this section. So therefore, there are various judgments also on this aspect, wherein it is clearly laid down, not only by the high courts, but also by the apex court, wherein it is clearly said that if a service of a summon is made to a employee or to a servant, it will not lead to a proper service. So therefore, we can draw the analogy from there. We can draw and we can fight for our clients as a chartered accountant also, that the service of someone was not proper. And if the service is not proper, the entire proceedings can be at toss. So the judgment which I'm inclined to inform all of you, and if you can note down, that will be better. Otherwise, this material is anyways given to you, but this material does not contain those case laws. It is Hemendra Nath versus Archana. Hemendra Nath versus Archana, 1971. This is a judgment of Calcutta High Court, wherein the court held that to justify service under section 64, it should be shown that the proper efforts were made to find the person summoned. Now, this is again an important aspect. Officer to aapko bol dega कि Avinash, we were searching for you, but since you are not found, we tried for 15 days, but you are not there, and therefore we have summoned to, or we have given this summon to your brother. Fair enough, that is acceptable and valid under section 64. But there are situations wherein my brother goes there in the department for filing an adjournment or for filing some document. The officer finds him, locates him, and serve the summon to him. So that is not a valid service, because the efforts cannot be placed. The efforts cannot be proved that yes, the department or the officer or the authority or the court have taken proper efforts or tried at their level best to locate me and to serve the summon. I hope you all are getting what the point which I am trying to share with all of you. This is important. To my limited understanding, this is something which is very important. क्योंकि बहुत लड़ाई, बहुत fights, आप केवल इन्हीं arguments पर जीत जाओगे that the summon is not properly served, summon is not properly drafted, summon is vague. Very recently, Delhi High Court have quashed a summon because it was vague in nature. It was not having any information directly what kind of summons you are receiving. 2017-18 onwards के बाद के सारे documents लेके आ जाओ. अरे see, please try to understand what is the inquiry going on. What is the proceeding for which I am asked for the submission of a document or a record. I may not be asked for everything and anything that is with me to be submitted to them. So therefore, it is very important that what we have read in section 61, that it has to be very specific. The summon cannot be vague. It has to be very specific that yes, this is the inquiry going on. We are having the reasons to believe that you have certain informations, evidences, documents or things in your control, and therefore you are being summoned either to supply the copies of those documents or to make a statement or whatsoever. So it cannot be a vague. So section 64 clearly said that serving to a summon will not be a sufficient service. At the same time, if it is served to any adult male member of your family who is residing with you, without showing any efforts being made to locate you, that means the person to whom or on whom the summon was issued, it will not be a valid service. Now, friends, moving to section 65, it says procedure when service cannot be effected as before provided. Now, if it is a situation wherein the summon is not in a position to be served, neither as per section 62, nor as per section 63 or section 64, then in that case, there is a solution which is given. It is also included in order number 5 of CPC, which says you can affix the summon. You can affix the summon on some conspicuous part of the house or the homestead in which the person summoned is ordinarily residing. So therefore, if nothing can be done, I am not personally available, my relatives are not there, or my family members are not there, then in that case, they can come to my place wherein I'm residing and they can affix the summon on the wall, and that can be regarded as a proper summoning as per them. Now, this is important because let us read further. It says, thereupon the court or the authority, as per me, after making such inquiries as it thinks fit, may either declare the summon has been duly served or order fresh service in such manner as it considers proper. So therefore, either the court will say that yes, it has been served properly, or the court can say that no, another service is required, and therefore the court or the authority can issue a fresh summon. Now, again, there is a very important judgment of Karnataka Division Bench in Mark Charles India Limited versus Chandrasekhar in 2005, wherein the court has held that when personal service cannot be effected under section 62 or 64, then the law permits the substituted service. And what is that substituted service? Affixing on the wall of the place where where the person to whom the summon has been issued ordinarily reside. So that is section 65. Moving further, please scroll down. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Actually, somehow from my iPad, I was not able to connect it. Section 66, service on government servant. I'm leaving it. I'm not dealing with this because this is not that relevant for us. Section 67, service of summons outside local limits. Now, please appreciate as a thumb rule that whenever an allegation is made to a person who is not within our local limits or the local limits of the court, generally it is served. Generally, in these cases, the service is being done by the equivalent post magistrate or officer of that locality under whose jurisdiction the person to whom the summon has been issued resides. So therefore, let us take an example from Gujarat. If I have to issue a summon is being issued to a person who is sitting at Calcutta. So I cannot, because I do not have jurisdiction, so I cannot go there and serve the summon. So therefore, I will request the magistrate or the equivalent officer there in Calcutta, and he will serve the summon as if this summon was issued by him. So this is something which is very, very important. So therefore, if the court goes beyond its local jurisdiction, then it should send the summon in duplicate to a magistrate under whose jurisdiction the person resides. The person is residing, and the magistrate under whose jurisdiction the person is residing must serve it or serve through the concerned police to the person to whom it has to be served. And please bear in mind, this service will be as if the summon was issued by that magistrate in Calcutta. Now moving to proof of service in such cases and when service officer not present. Now this is again very important, and I'll just place an example which will make it easy for all of us to understand. See, at times it happens that the person who has served is not available. So what is the best way of coming out with this? The best way which we adopt is preparing an affidavit, getting it signed by the person who has served the summon, and placing it on record. So therefore, you can read section 68 subsection 2. It says the affidavit mentioned in this section may be attached to the duplicate of the summons and returned to the court. And this is what we are doing day in, day out. What we do is, when a notice is being issued by the court to the respondents, we serve those notices. If the direct service is allowed to us, we serve those notices to the respondents, take an acknowledgement from them, file an affidavit of the service, wherein it becomes a proof that yes, this service has been made. Because as I've already stated, unless a summon is served, unless there is proof of service, no action can be taken. The proceedings cannot start. Section 69 deals with service of summons on witness by post. So therefore, we have already discussed that for a witness, service can be made by post also. Please scroll down. I'll be requesting to click on the go to content at glance. Yes. Now click on summons to produce 91 and 92. These are two important sections which I wanted to cover, although it may not be having much of the impact, but this is just for a glimpse I'm incorporating. This is CRPC section 91, which says summons to produce document or other things. See what summons under section 70 of the GST Act we are receiving. Law says if the officer who has instituted or initiated an inquiry has reasons to believe that you have certain very important information with you, or a document is there with you, or some very important content which can be useful for his proceedings or his inquiry, then in that case he can issue a summon to you and ask you to produce that document or other things. So therefore, this is section 91, which says that the summon can be issued wherein the court may ask you to produce a document or any other thing. So this is all about section 91, and section 92 deals with procedure as to letters and telegrams, how it has to be delivered and how it has to be summoned. So therefore, please, again, you can click on go to glance and we'll move further. Yeah, please. Now, this is what we have covered is pertaining to the summons part in CRPC law. Now, let us just have very quickly, because time is running very fast. So I'll just give a glimpse in the CPC also, because most of the issues, most of the provisions are more or less identical in CPC also. Now, please click on section 27 to 32 link. Yes. Section 27 deals with summons and recovery, summons to the defendants. Again, same, where a suit has been duly instituted, a summon may be issued to the defendant to appear and answer the claim and may be served in manner which is prescribed, that is order number 5, on such a day not beyond 30 days from the date of institution of the suit. Now, here the important aspect is, in a civil suit, if any suit is instituted against a person and a summon is being issued to him, it has to be issued within a period of 30 days. So that is something which I wanted to point out, and therefore I've specifically included this. Now, section 28, service of summons where defendant resides in another state. We are already aware that whenever a defendant is residing in another state, then we'll have to seek the help of the local court or the local authorities in that particular state. So the same provision is there, which we have already read. Subsection 2 deals with something which is different because it is a civil suit. So therefore, language becomes important. So it can be in Hindi, it has to be translated. If it is in the vernacular language, it has to be translated in Hindi, where the language of the court issuing the summons is Hindi. Or in any other cases, it has to be in Hindi or in English, whichever is comfortable. So that is section 28, because at times you will find it difficult, because when you are receiving a summon, let's say from Kerala, and it is in their local language, you will not be able to understand that. So therefore, the translated version and the power to translate is given in section 28, subsection 2. Service to foreign summons, service of foreign summons, this also is very, very apparent and identical to what we have read and understood. So therefore, I'm skipping it. Please scroll down. Because again, we'll have to take the help of the embassy, help of the authorities or the revenue court, which is established in that part. to serve the summons. Moving to section 30, it says power to order discovery and the like. Now section 30 has to be read with section 32. So I will be requesting to scroll down to section 31 and 32. Once we read section 32, then we'll come back to section 30. That will be easy for us to understand. Now summons to witness, we all are aware that summons to witness can be sent, and it can be sent through post also. So shall apply to summons to give evidence and to produce documents and other material objects. 27, 28, and 29 will be applicable to the witness also, mutatis mutandis. Now friends, section 32 is important, and then we'll read section 30. What does section 32 provides? Section 32 says penalty for default. The court may compel the attendance of any person to whom a summon has been issued under section 30. And for that purpose may even issue an arrest warrant, attach or sell his property, impose a fine, or order him to furnish security for his appearance and a default commit him to this civil prison. Now let us say, this is the penalty which is there for default of honoring a summon which is issued under section 30. Now what is section 30? Let us go and have a glimpse of it. Please scroll it upwards. Yes, please. Power to order discovery and the like. Now you will be able to understand, if we are not honoring this summon which is issued under section 30, the implications can be very wide. Subject to such conditions and limitations as may be prescribed, the court may at any time, either of its own motion or on the application of any party, either by itself or even on the basis of application by the party, A, make such orders as may be necessary or reasonable in all matters relating to the delivery and answering of interrogatives, interrogatories, the admission of documents and the facts, and the discovery, inspection, production, impounding, and return of documents or other material objects producible as evidence. So this is very important, that any order can be made which is considered to be necessary or reasonable in all proceedings which are related to delivery and answering of the interrogatories, the admission or the documents and the facts. B, the court can issue summons to person whose attendance is required either to give evidence or to produce documents or such other objects we all are aware of, and order any fact to be proved by affidavit. If such kind of summon is being issued, wherein some information or some details is being asked for, in case of any proceedings which is already being undertaken by the court or the authorities, then we cannot afford to avoid it. It is our responsibility and it is binding on us. If we avoid it, then unfortunately, I'm afraid to say that we'll have to face huge consequences which are already read by all of us under section 32. So therefore, we should avoid such kind of situation and honor the summon whenever it is issued to us. Please click on go to content at a glance. Yes. Now section 132 and 133, I'll just give a glimpse. It is section 132 deals with exceptions which is given to a woman, and 133 also deals with exception. Please click on section 120 to 133. Yeah. Section 132 deals with exception or exemption of certain women from personal appearance. So wherein, because of the country wherein she is residing or because of some other reasons or the local rituals, if she cannot be made personally liable for appearing before the authorities, then in that case the exemption is given. But subsection 2 is very important. It says nothing herein contained shall be deemed to exempt such women from arrest in execution of civil process in any case in which the arrest of women is not prohibited by this code. So if the prohibition is there for a woman for a particular action or instance or the offense, then only the exemption is applicable and available. Otherwise, this exemption will not be applicable. So therefore, this is again very important. I thought that being a chartered accountant, we should be aware of those persons to whom a summon can never be issued. And therefore, those are in section 133, wherein we can see president, vice president, speaker, ministers, all these persons are the persons to whom a summon cannot be issued. Yes, they can be called for. The explanations can be sought. It is not that they are exempted from making any explanations against any allegations, but a normal summon cannot be sent to them. They cannot be asked to appear in court for the purpose of these explanations. That is the point which is there in section 133. Now move further, please. Yeah. Now we can click on order number 5. I'll just show it and then we'll go to the arrest part because time is running very fast. Now, this is order 5, which includes the entire procedure for issuance of summons under CPC. And why I have incorporated this, because when you will read section 70, if I'm not wrong, section 70 subsection 2 says that it is a proceeding which is judicial proceedings under the CPC, Code of Civil Procedure 1908. So therefore we must be aware what is falling from the law, and therefore order 5 of the CPC becomes important because that deals with the issuance and service of summons. And trust me, all the provisions and everything that we have discussed up till now, so far as summons are concerned, are incorporated in this order number 5. So therefore I'll not be taking it ahead. I'll not be wasting or investing time in this, looking to the paucity of time, and directly now we'll switch over to arrest and warrants. Kindly click on go to glance and then we'll go to the arrest provisions. Now, before discussing the arrest provisions, warrants and arrest, we can see that there is a line which is written, or with an important question which I've asked, that whether there is any difference between arrest and custody. Can we say that the arrest and custody are two different things? As per my limited understanding, first and foremost, let us try to understand what is arrest and what is custody. Is it possible that a custody can be there, but arrest may not be there, or arrest is there without custody? So therefore, yes, there is a difference between arrest and custody. You may be asked for a custody, or you may be detained for a particular information, for a particular interrogation, for a particular questioning, but you may not be arrested. At the same time, it is never possible that you are arrested, but the custody is not there. So therefore, arrest is a broader term. Custody is the inception. Let me put an example. I was mentioning about one of the matters which I was dealing, and there are a lot of matters which we are dealing in day in and day out now. And generally, whenever a person is, let's say, arrested for an offense under GST, wherein the allegation is that he is arrested because of the bogus invoices. आजकल सबसे ज़्यादा यही चल रहा है. So what does the department pray for, or the authority who is arresting pray for? The initial submission is not only to detain, because that person is already detained, is in custody, and therefore within 24 hours, as per the provisions of the law, he will have to present it before the honorable magistrate. But here the important aspect is, they ask for the remand of that person, which is in common terms known as police custody, PC. बहुत commonly lawyers उसको use करते हैं इस term को. PC है या JC है? PC is a police custody, wherein the person is kept or remanded or detained in the police custody for the purpose of further interrogations. And once those interrogations and the collections of evidences and records and documents to the satisfaction of the officer is done, then thereafter the court sends that person to the judicial custody. So this is a difference between a custody which can be a police custody as well as a judicial custody. आप सुनते होंगे कि उसको remand दिया गया. So that remand is what a police custody. The person who is arresting can detain him, can ask the questions. And judicial custody is when he is sent to the prison, to the civil prison. Now, custody can be there, but arrest may not be there. So therefore, we need to understand the difference. And therefore, there is one very important aspect and a very important case law, which is Directorate of Enforcement. Directorate of Enforcement versus Deepak Mahajan, AIR 1994, Supreme Court 1775, wherein the Honorable Court has clearly observed that in every arrest there is custody. Because जब तक आप उस आदमी को नहीं लेंगे, पकड़ेंगे नहीं, तब तक आप उसको अरेस्ट कैसे कर सकते हैं? So therefore, in every arrest there is custody, but not vice versa. Meaning thereby, arrest cannot be done without custody, wherein the custody is certainly possible without arrest. So both the words custody and arrest are not synonymous, and therefore these two words are different. So therefore this citation can be remembered for it, because it may help we also as a chartered accountant that a lot of times the person is saying, मुझे arrest कर लिया था, मुझे 3 दिन रखा. So that is not arrest, that is custody. And there are separate provisions pertaining to custody and arrest. Now let us try to evaluate. Now we chartered accountants may not be finding it useful because so far as arrest is concerned, generally we have no role to play, but I would personally feel and believe that we should be aware of the provisions pertaining to arrest also, because there are a lot of rights which are given to the person who is being arrested. At the same time, we as a professionals must also focus on advising our clients when he is arrested or when he is on bail after arrest, because there we can play a role. Certainly we cannot play a role in appearing for the person who is being arrested, because that the law does not permit, or the Advocate Act does not permit us, or the manual of court does not permit it. Now let us try to understand what is the need of arrest. What is the need of arrest? Why an arrest is happening? And this we can connect it with GST also. Why? What is the purpose of being of arresting a person? When Article 21 is there in the Constitution of India, which clearly enables us, or rather commits or guarantees that this is your fundamental right. The right of liberty is your fundamental rights, and therefore they cannot take away that fundamental right from us. Then why the need of arrest? More precisely, if I have to link it, because we, the participants are chartered accountants, they are dealing day in, day out with the PMLA or maybe income tax, maybe GST. So they will very easily understand this. Let us take an example of a fake invoice racket. I have incorporated, or I have taken 100 registrations. Fake 100 forms are created. The invoices are issued from one to another, two to another, three to another, and it's go on. Now different proprietors are there of these 100 companies. If I am the mastermind, if the department alleges that you, Avinash Poddar, you are the mastermind and therefore you should be arrested, the question arises why I should be arrested. I should be arrested, number one, to find out the cause of the offense. What was the cause of this offense? Number two, I can be arrested for further prosecution, for further interrogation. That if I am in their custody, they can interrogate me further, they can ask the questions, they can identify the issues, and they can accordingly prepare a case. Further, I can be arrested so as to prevent the further incurrence or concurrence of the crime or the manipulation of records. In case of GST, what I can do is I can manipulate the records, which is very easily possible. If I'm set free, if I'm not under the custody, I can manipulate the records very, very easily. So therefore, to prevent that also, the arrest can happen. Now the question comes, again, a very, very important question comes, that arrest is a preventive measure or not. So please bear me for some time. I'll certainly ask this question, answer this question to all of you, that whether it is preventive, because there are a lot of questions which I face on day-to-day basis, wherein the people ask me, कि ये provisions arrest के क्यों हैं tax के laws में? Tax के laws में there is no crime which is involved. It is only a financial crime or an economic offense. So why the arrest provisions? Honorable Bombay High Court very recently has said that this is an economic offense and it is more strict. It is something which is more dangerous than a crime or a murder. So I'll not deal into that. I'll not dwell into that because that is not the role given to me today. And we are running short of time because I intend to cover by 7:15 and I will cover by 7:15 so that we can have question and answers for 15 minutes. So now section 41 to section 60 capital A and section 70 to section 81 deals with the Code of Criminal Procedures, and in CPC section 55 to 59 and rule 37 to rule 40 of order 21 is relevant. I'll simply give a glimpse of section 41 to 60 capital A, just a glimpse, and then we'll go to the IPC portion. Please click on this. Yeah. Now, this is why I wanted to point out or include this, because we need to understand, even from the perspective of GST, that when a police officer or the officer can arrest without warrant. So therefore, to understand this, we'll have to go back and try to understand the kind of offenses. The offense is contemplated as two kind of offenses. More specifically, they are billable, non-billable, cognizable, non-cognizable, and combination of these warrant case, summon case, not going into all those things, not having that much of time, unfortunately. But I would certainly like to cover from the perspective of GST read with section 41 and 41 capital. It says when a police officer or an officer can arrest without warrant, because generally a warrant issued by a magistrate is important and mandatory for instituting any arrest action. But there are situations wherein he can be arrested even without warrant, even without order of the court. Which are those situations? The situations, as per my limited understanding, is whenever an offense is done or is committed, which is a cognizable and non-billable offense, the officer can arrest the person without a warrant. This is in context of our GST law. Otherwise, there are number of events which are mentioned, and I'll read for the benefit of all of you few of those, so that you can understand and you can correlate. But in GST or in taxation, whenever the event is, whenever the crime or the action is a cognizable and non-billable, then in that case, the person can be arrested even without warrant. The same is in section 41. Let us read some of the portion of this. Any police officer may, without an order from a magistrate and without a warrant, arrest any person, A, who commits in presence of a police officer a cognizable offense. So this is what we have touched upon. A cognizable offense is to be kept in mind. If it is committed, then even a person can be arrested without warrant. Against whom a reasonable complaint has been made, or credible information has been received, or a reasonable suspicion exists that he has committed a cognizable offense, punishable with imprisonment for a term which may not be less than 7 years, or which may extend to 7 years, whether with or without fine, if the following conditions are satisfied, namely. Now, these conditions are also specified. 2 conditions are there. I'll not be dealing with this, but I'll just like to point out in relation to GST, how you can read this. Please go through section 132 read with section 69. It specifies that if an offense is there, which is falling in section 132 subsection 1 clause A, B, C, D, and the amount exceeds 5 crores, law specifically says that it is a cognizable and non-billable offense. Whereas, if you'll appreciate, clause B says where the punishment is for more than or equivalent to 7 years. Whereas in GST, the maximum punishment is 5 years. Still, the law says that it is a cognizable and a non-billable offense, and therefore, the person can be arrested without a warrant by the officer. The only condition which we'll be reading later, if the time will permit, that he will have to be produced within 24 hours before the magistrate, who is a first-class magistrate. Let me go to clause C. To prevent such person from causing the evidence of the offense to disappear or tampering with such evidence in any manner. So this is what we have already covered, that if there is a doubt, if there is a doubt that the person can, if he is set free, then he can misuse, or he can play with the evidences and he can tamper with those. So therefore, if these are the situations, then the person can be arrested even without warrant. Please scroll down. Yeah, scroll down further. I'll move to the next part. Yeah. Notice of appearance before, no, yes, 41A. Notice of appearance before the police officer. Now, there can be a notice which can be sent to a person against whom a reasonable complaint. So therefore, this is a situation wherein he is not arrested. So what does the law say? It says, in all cases where the arrest of a person is not required under provisions of subsection 1 of 41. If he is not required to be arrested, then a notice will be issued to the person against whom a complaint has been made. And the police officer can ask him the relevant informations, and accordingly he can decide whether the person needs to be arrested or not. So subsection 2 says, where such a notice is issued to any person, it shall be the duty of that person to comply with the terms of the notice, and it is mandatory. Please bear in mind, you can identify and determine the legality and validity of a notice. And if it is found that the notice is valid and legal, please bear in mind, you are not supposed to not honor that notice. You will have to honor that summon or notice whatsoever it may be. So therefore, it becomes our duty. And if we fail to do that duty, then there is our legal provisions in or repercussions in Indian Penal Code. Just I'll touch upon 41A and B, and then we'll go to the IPC provisions. And I'll be submitting my apologies that in the paucity of time, I may not be able to complete this thing, but I hope that I've tried to cover the basic of the summon and the arrest which was given to me. Now, subsection 3 says, where such person complies and continues to comply with the notice, he shall not be arrested. Now, this is important. He shall not be arrested in respect of the offense referred to in the notice, unless, for the reasons to be recorded, the police officer is of the opinion that he ought to be arrested. And subsection 4 says, where such person at any time fails to comply with the terms of the notice or is unwilling to identify himself, the police officer may, subject to such orders as may have been passed by the competent court, in this behalf arrest him for the offense mentioned in the notice. So this is again very important. I will have to comply with. If I fail to comply with the notices that I've received or the summons that I've received, then it will lead to, please remember and recollect, section 27 to 32 of the CPC. Section 32 clearly said that the person can be arrested. Likewise, the notice under CRPC for the arrest or for the offenses which is being inquired by a police officer, if those are not satisfied, if those are not complied with, then subsection 4 says that even in that case, the arrest can happen. The person can be arrested. Now moving to section 41, capital B, procedure of arrest and duties of officer making an arrest. Now, this is very, very important, and we chartered accountants can certainly play an important role in these situations also, because it clearly says the duties of the officers who is making an arrest. It says every police officer making an arrest shall bear an accurate, visible, and clear identification of his name, which will facilitate easy identification of the person who is arrested. Bear a memorandum of arrest which shall be attested by at least one witness who is member of the family of the person arrested or a respectable member of the locality where the arrest is made, countersigned by the person arrested, and inform the arrested person, unless the memorandum is attested by the family member, that he has the right to have a relative or a friend named by him to be informed of his arrest. Now, I'll not deal with it further, but yes, I would like to give an example, share with all of you how you as a chartered accountant can play a very vital role. See, nowadays there are a lot of cases which are coming up for the arrest, specifically alleging the bogus invoicing. Now, there are 100 firms, as I have already given an example. Now, out of 100 firms, what department is doing, they are, let's say it's a syndicate of 10 people. What they will do is, they will arrest a person under CGST. I've come across, and I'm arguing those matters before Honorable Gujarat High Court. So first, CGST will come and arrest the person for 50 firms. He will pick and choose 50 firms and arrest him. alleged for the fake invoices. He is aware about the entire 100 firms. Then once he is released on bail, then SGST will come and arrest him for rest of the 50 firms. So therefore, Mr. Avinash, against whom the allegation was that he is indulged into fake invoice racketing, he has created more than 100 firms, or he is a mastermind of more than 100 firms. First, he will be arrested by one authority. दोनों भाई भाई हैं तो बांट के खाएंगे, ऐसा कुछ हो गया. So then he will be arrested by the other party also. So therefore, the important aspect which I wanted to cover here is the arrest memorandum must contain, and it becomes a very important and vital document for we chartered accountants also to refer and consider. Because generally in arrest memo, they will mention all the names. They will also state the statements which are being relied upon. Now, if a statement which is being relied upon constitutes or is including name of all the 100 firms, then you can very well say that the arrest is illegal. Because जब आपको पता था कि अविनाश का नेम 100 फर्म्स में है, तो आपने क्यों केवल 50 ही फर्म्स को सेलेक्ट किया और उसके एलिगेशन में इसको अरेस्ट किया, और क्यों एसजीएसटी बाकी के 50 फर्म्स के लिए अरेस्ट कर रहा है? सो देयरफॉर इट कैन नॉट बी, इट इज वायोलेटिव ऑफ आर्टिकल 20 सब रूल 20 सब आर्टिकल 2 of article 20, because it is tantamounting or leading to double jeopardy. For one offense, you cannot be tried twice. You cannot be punished twice. So therefore, this is important, and we chartered accountants can certainly play an important role there. Now, please click on go to content so that we can move further and quickly towards the Indian Penal Code. Now, please click on 107 to 120. We'll just see one or two sections wherein we can just have a feel of what kind of repercussions can be there if we fall into the trap of being an abettor to an offense. Section 107 says abatement of a thing. When a person is said to be abating to an offense, it says a person abets the doing of a thing who first instigates any person to do that thing. So we chartered accountants will never do that. Or secondly, engages with one or more persons or person in any conspiracy for doing of any that thing. So like if it is a fake invoice racket, either we engage ourselves or some other person. If an act or illegal commission takes place in persons of that conspiracy, and in order to the doing of that thing, or thirdly, intentionally aids by any act or illegal omission the doing of that thing. Now, these are the situations wherein a person can be brought into or dragged into. So therefore, we have to be very much aware, very much cautious about such situations wherein we are advising any person, and from our advice, he is deriving a situation or a conclusion that we have advised him to do something which is illegal, or rather I would say not in accordance with law. So if any such situation arises, please bear in mind, friends, we may be trapped in section 107, which is a part of IPC, which says that yes, you will be punished. Now, the unfortunate part is many chartered accountants are alleged and arrested. And the allegation is either he was involved or he has abated to an offense. And even when you read section 122, subsection 1, wherein 21 offenses are listed, one of those offenses are abating to an offense. So therefore, if I'm abating as a chartered accountant or as an advocate, then it is certainly bad for me, and it may lead to a punishment as per the provisions of IPC also. It is not only that GST will be applicable, it may also have an impact as per the provisions of IPC. Abater, section 108. A person who abets an offense, who abets either the commission of an offense or the commission of an act which would be an offense, if committed by a person capable by law of committing an offense with the same intention or knowledge as that of the abater. So therefore, this again is to be noted, and for we professionals to take a note of this, that directly or indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, we should not tender any opinion, any advice, or any representation which may lead to a conclusion or determination about a fact that we are trying to abate to an offense, because that is something which can cause a lot of damage to us. Please scroll further. If there is something which I want to cover, I'll certainly cover, and otherwise we'll move forward. Please scroll down and click on go to glance now, because I'll not be able to cover. So therefore, what I would wish to cover is let the contempt not be covered. Section 191 to 203. Please include that. Yes. Now, for summons specifically, we receive a lot of summons, and at times we intend to give something as a statement which may not be correct, and then we retract it. If retraction is not on record or retraction is not admitted, even I would say we can be trapped in section 191, wherein giving a false evidence can be an allegation, because we have submitted an allegation as a false evidence or a false statement, which may lead to the punishments. So therefore, giving false evidence and fabricating false evidence, this is section 191, 192. I'll just read for the benefit of all of us section 193, because we are running close of time. So I'll try to cover up within 5 minutes some of the important aspects. 193 says punishment for false evidence. Whoever intentionally gives false evidence in any judicial proceedings. Now, please bear in mind, section 70 subsection 2 says it is a judicial proceedings under CPC. So whoever does that in judicial proceedings or fabricates false evidence for the purpose of being used in any stage of a judicial proceeding shall be punished with imprisonment. Further, I will not read. So this is something which is very important, that even a person can be punished for the purpose of giving or for giving false evidence. Moving, section 194 says giving or fabricating false evidence with intent to procure conviction of capital offense. So I'm not dealing into this. Please click on go to glance and then click on Article 22. Yes, Constitution of India, Article 22. Correct. Now, Article 19, as we all are aware, one very important context under Article 19 is Article 19(1) bracket A, which deals with right to speech. Now, whenever we, because this is our session and therefore I have to include this, I have to cover this. Whenever a summons is issued to us and we are forced to state on oath and get a statement recorded, the right to speech, or rather I would say freedom to speak, certainly is a rescue for all of us. If the officer under coercive action or coercion or in normal situation wants us to record something which we are not inclined, to speak, I'm of the view you should never record it. And even in case you are recording it under coercion, please retract and specify Article 19 very clearly, because it says it gives you a fundamental right, which is freedom to speak. And therefore, whatever you want to state must be recorded. If it is not recorded as per your convenience and directions, then you can very well retract that, because that will be leading to the adversity and it will be against and violative of Article 19 of the Constitution of India. Now moving to the last topic, Article 22, which provides for protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. Now Article 21 deals with right of personal liberty. which says a personal liberty has to be given as a fundamental right to all the citizens of the country by virtue of the Constitution of India. Now, Article 22 says that there has to be a protection against the arrest and detention in certain cases. That protection is given in the Constitution of India. It is not in any other statute, and therefore I intend to cover this. Sub Article 1. No person who is arrested shall be detained in custody without being informed as soon as may be on the grounds of such arrest, nor shall he be denied the right to consult and to be defended by a legal practitioner of his choice. Now the question arises, can a chartered accountant go there and advise him? The answer is yes. It is not mandated that only an advocate can go there and advise him. Neither the Constitution nor any statute says that. So therefore, even a chartered accountant can go there and advise his client who is being arrested. Sub Article 2, every person who is arrested and detained in custody shall be produced before the nearest magistrate within a period of 24 hours of such arrest, excluding the time necessary for the journey from the place of arrest to the court. Now again, we can play an important role. If a person is not arrested within 24 hours of his arrest, then that is violative of Article 22, Sub-Article 2, and meaning thereby it is violative and therefore it is unconstitutional. So that action can be declared as bad in law. But generally what the department does it, वो रात को या सुबह 3 बजे आपकी अरेस्ट दिखाते हैं ताकि उनको नेक्स्ट शाम तक 6 बजे तक 7 बजे तक कोर्ट में प्रोड्यूस करने का टाइम मिल जाए. So this is something which is being there as a regular practice, and unfortunately we are helpless and we cannot do anything. But as per the mandate, and this is a constitution के basis पे law बने हैं जितने भी बने हैं. So therefore it is most important document of this country, and which clearly says that within 24 hours the person has to be produced before the magistrate. Anyways, sub Article 3 is very, very crucial and contrary. It says nothing in clause 1 and 2 shall apply. This means the exception in sub Article 1 and sub Article 2. It says to any person who for the time being is an enemy alien. If a person is an enemy alien, then in that case the sub Article 1 and 2 will not apply, and therefore he can be arrested and he may not be produced. B, to any person who is arrested or detained under any law for providing for preventive detention. Now, this is something which we all should be aware of. Preventive detention. What is preventive detention? As per my limited understanding, I would say that preventive detention is nothing but when you foresee that there can be a bigger damage or a crime can be committed by a person, then you can very well go for a preventive detention of that person. You can detain him for the preventive measures to avoid further crime. Because let's say if somebody is getting aggressive and you are now contemplating that that person can cause or commit a crime, then in that case, you can arrest that person, and sub Article 1 or sub Article 2 may not apply in those cases. This is mostly in case of the terrorist activities or the activities which are some or the other way against the defense policies of the country. Sub-Article 4, I'll stop with this and I'll cover only Sub-Article 4 and then stop our discussion. No law providing for preventive detention shall authorize the detention of a person for a longer period than 3 months. 3 months are the maximum period which is there in the law, and therefore you can very well read the CRPC and the other provisions which says and which mentions about the default bail. If somebody is arrested and a charge sheet is not filed within 60 days or 90 days as the case may be, then he gets bail by default. So this is how the law has been made from the Constitution of India, that 90 days is drawn from this. That is the maximum period for which you can detain a person without filing a charge sheet. After that, you cannot. So that is something which is relating to the default bail. With this, I would like to open up the session for the question answers. Once again, I would submit to all the participants that I'm extremely sorry for the inconvenience and also for not being able to complete the entire topic, because this was such a vast topic that even the entire day for just covering the portion of summons would be insufficient. But still, I've tried to cover up and give an overview so far as summons, arrests, and the Constitution and the IPC is concerned, so far as we chartered accountants are there to not only to advise our clients, but also to safeguard ourselves. So with this, once again, thank you to each one of you, and many thanks to the Ahmedabad branch for giving me this opportunity. More specifically, the entire committee and the chairman of the Indirect Tax Committee of Ahmedabad branch. Over to you, Rahul bhai.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation. And we will surely keep another session for the remaining part so that the participant can have the overall analysis on the same. Sir, we have certain questions, so we will take the same. Now, the first question is, sir, that in case of bailable offense, where the duty amount is less than 5 crore rupees, so as it is said, the bail is the right of the person.
Correct.
So, is the bail has to be applied by the person, or it is deemed that after the arrest he is granted the bail?
See, there are two things to look into this. One is whenever the offense and the quantum is not exceeding 5 crores, he should not be detained. To be very honest, what can be done is he will be arrested and he can be produced before the magistrate within 24 hours in case the amount exceeds 5 crores. If it is less than 5 crores, then generally what I have observed is the person can be arrested as per the provisions of the law, but he will be released on bail immediately, because the person who is arresting steps into the shoes of the police officer. He has the power to release the person on bail, putting on the conditions which he wants to put in. So therefore, whatever conditions he wants to place, that he cannot go to some other city, he will have to hand over his passport, whatever conditions he want to place, you can place those conditions, take the sureties of some other persons, respected persons, which is there in every bail, and then the bail can be granted. Now, so far as default bail is concerned, as I have already stated, since the time limit of maximum punishment is 5 years in GST, if any punishment is less than 7 years, then default bail is I think 60 days. After 60 days, the bail is automatically granted. Once you apply for the bail, it will be automatically granted. There will be no condition or no charge sheet if not filed within 60 days, which is not possible in case of GST, because they cannot issue a show cause notice within 60 days. So therefore, in most of the cases, the person will be released on bail. But yes, my precise answer would be that generally I have seen that whenever the allegation is less than 5 crores and the person is arrested, he will be released on bail by the same person on the same dates.
Okay. Sir, the next question, in case of the recording the statement during the summons, so can the person ask for the copy of the statement?
See, no law prescribes for that. Whenever you are giving a statement, or let's say the person is investigating or inquiring into some issue, and he is taking a statement of 100 people, it is not important and it is not mandatory for him to rely on all those 100 statements. He will be, for the purpose of his charge sheet or for the purpose of his show cause notice, he will be relying on, let's say, 50 statements, and 50 he will not be relying upon. So therefore, the statement copy will certainly be provided to you, but only those statement copies which are being relied upon and which are used against you. See, the common perception of law says any decision against you, any adverse call against you cannot be taken without following the principles of natural justice. That means without providing you an opportunity of being heard, which is audit alteram partem. If something is violating that, it is against the Constitution. So therefore, if they are relying upon your statement which is being submitted by you, The statement copy will certainly be provided once the charge sheet or the show cause notice will be issued and the allegations are made on the basis of that statement against you. So therefore, it is not the statement will be provided at the time of recording, it will be provided at the time of allegation.
The next is, sir, is issuing the summons is the starting of the proceeding. That means if the SGST department has issued the summons and the statement has been recorded now, and no further any investigation has been arising, no any show cause notice has been issued by the department. Now for the same matter and the same issue, can the CGST department can also issue the summons?
Technically speaking, no. There is section 6, subsection 2, clause B, which says if any action has been taken by one of the authorities, then the same action or for the same cause, the action cannot be taken by some other authority. But that is more precisely applicable in case of such cases. If it is only a summon case, then yes, certainly both the authorities can issue a summon. Now it is up to us how to comply with that summon. But my only submission would be that any summon that is being received by us, it is certainly a proceeding which is getting instituted by way of issuance of a summon. And therefore, we are legally bound to comply with that summon. That is only I can say. Now, how to reply back is a strategy. If SGST comes forth and you don't want to go before the SGST, then you can reply back that I have also received a summon from CGST, which I have complied with. It is on the same aspects, the same case is being covered, the same issue is being addressed there. So kindly transfer the case to CGST. That can be done strategically, but you will have to reply back to both the summons.
Okay, so we need to comply with the requirement of the summons and has to reply.
Yes.
Sir, what is the importance of the retraction of the statement issued during the statement given under the coercive actions during the summons?
Retraction is very important, but retraction should not be tantamounting to afterthought. If we give a statement, let's say today, and after 1 month we are retracting the same, or once the show cause notice is received, we are retracting the same, it is of no importance. It has been let down and held by various courts at various point in time, wherein the courts have clearly said that a statement, if retracted, is leading to or because of the afterthought, then that retraction will be null and void. So we'll have to keep this in mind, and accordingly, if the retraction is done within the stipulated or the shortest possible time limit, let's say if I'm recording a statement today and tomorrow I'm retracting, or day after tomorrow, because tomorrow I may not be in the right frame of mind because of the coercive action taken against me. If I am retracting it in a day or two, then certainly retraction is very, very important, but it needs to be substantiated with some substance. We cannot just retract something which we have recorded. We cannot just retract कि मेरे को उन्होंने pressure करके लिखवा दिया. No, you cannot do that. You will have to substance what has exactly happened and why you want to retract or why you are retracting it. If that happens, then retraction is very legal and it is allowed also before the court of law.
Okay. Sir, the last question. If the client is reside in Gujarat and has one branch office at Maharashtra, can Maharashtra GST officer provide the copy of summons to employee located at the Maharashtra office for appearance of the owner located in Gujarat?
If I'm rightly understanding the question, it is I have a registration in Gujarat and Maharashtra both. The summon is issued to an employee of Maharashtra, and the owner of Gujarat is asked to appear before the Maharashtra authority.
Yes.
Now, as we have already read that summon can certainly be issued to a person who is located in some other state. There is no bar to this. What we have tried to understand is tried to locate is how this summon can be served. That also is a proper serving in this case. Then I am of the view, looking to the provisions of section 70 and the broad powers that has been given to the authorities. If it is a central authority, then yes, the person can be called off. If it is a state authority, then I'm doubtful, because then the jurisdiction of the state will come into play. And then the summon can very well be served with the help of the officer, some other officer in Gujarat. But yes, for any inquiry, any summon can be issued and the person can be asked to appear before what I can say. The inquiry against a person in Maharashtra for Gujarat cannot happen, but he can be called for any other inquiry for giving his statement or any evidences. That is certainly permissible, and it is being regularly implied also by the departmental officers.
Okay, sir. Now we are closing with this question answer. Now I'll request C. Ankit Sethia to give a vote of thanks to the sir.
Thank you, Rahul sir. Good evening to one and all present here and respected sir, Dr. Avinash Podar sir. It is such an honor for me to get the opportunity to thank you, the respected sir, and all the participants. On behalf of the Ahmedabad branch of WIRC of ICI, I would like to express my gratitude towards all the delegates of the webinar for their patiently presence and to make this webinar to a great success. I extend my gratitude to our learned speaker, Dr. Avinash, Advocate Avinash Podar sir, to take out time from his busy schedule and enlighten us on the matters of the GST litigations and then matters of the how to deal in the case of the summons and in the case of the arrest matter also. Thank you very much, sir. You are giving your precious time to us. We are very thankful to you, sir. And special thanks to all the committee members of Ahmedabad branch of WIRC of ICI for regularly organizing this type of wonderful webinars. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir,
Yes,
one request also received from the member. He has a query that what is the consequence after notice to the witness under section 160 CRPC to the person who have attended and answered. And also, 1 second, sir, I'll just note down that query. Sir, what is the consequence after notice to the witness under section 160 of CRPC to the person who have attended and answered? Also answer whether other state police office, state police can issue the notice to the witness in other state. And also I have read the provision to ask for the expense. Is there then from who we have to ask for the expense to attend the notice to witness at the other state, for example, Ahmedabad to Mumbai?
see, so far as expense is concerned, yes, the expense can certainly be asked for. It can certainly be said that since you want my presence to be there for inquiring your matter, you will have to bear the expenses. That is certainly permissible. Now, so far as the non-compliance or the non-serving of the summons to witness is concerned, or any notice to witness is concerned, I am of the view that if something is unanswered, not because of our mistake or our fault, it is certainly not an offense. But in case we have received or the witness has received the summon and he has not addressed to it, then we, as a person against whom the proceedings is being initiated, will not have any consequence whatsoever. The consequence, if any, will be only to the extent of witness, and which I have personally observed that the coercive action or the strict action is generally not taken against the witness, because witness anyways is coming to help in the proceedings. So therefore, I don't see any action to be taken against the person on whom the allegation is made, neither to the witness also.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for taking the last question also. Now, we will again
Thank you,
keep a
sir.
session on this to cover up the
Anytime.
remaining part. Thank
Sure.
you so much, sir, for your
Thank you.
grateful time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.